USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the Game of the Week podcast for Friday, December 27th, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This episode is sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Well, our game of the week this week has Arizona State and Harvard at 5 Point Arena in Irvine, California. And Jim Connelly is out there to catch those games. And earlier, he was able to catch up with Arizona State head coach Greg Powers.
It will be Harvard and Arizona State out in Southern California. And it's nice to be in person with an interview that I get to do, and it's the head coach of Arizona State. That's Greg Powers, and thanks for the time, and welcome to sunny Southern California.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's great to be here with you.
Looking at this, you're taking a trip out to California, away from your campus. Harvard, obviously, they're going coast to coast. This is the first time hockey's been here in 20 years since the Frozen Four in '99. What do you think is the reason to bring the game here, and how much can this exposure maybe help your program as you're really trying to maybe see more Pac-12 teams add hockey?
It's certainly twofold. I think, obviously, first and foremost, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow the game, our program out west in any and every way that we can. And this is an event that's really largely in part, thanks to Harvard. It was really their vision and Sean O'Brien's vision, their ops guy. And we've helped with some stuff, but we're excited to be here. And the facility is absolutely gorgeous that we're playing in. It's a first-class facility, the Ducks practice facility. It's sold out tomorrow, from what I'm told, so the appetite is there. And we're excited to expose this market to the highest level of college hockey, and one that they haven't seen in 20 years.
As you've been building your program, how many conversations have you had, or have people in your athletic department actually had with the Pac-12 schools?
I think there's been very light conversations. They're all paying very close attention to what we're doing and how we're doing it. I think they're taken back by our early success, to be honest, and we want them to think, if ASU can do it, why can't we? And I think once our building is done and it's built, and we're an actual revenue sport generating, money for our athletic department, which we know we will, then it has a chance to really take off out west.
Let's get to the hockey, and I want to get your thoughts on your season to date at this point. I look at your schedule and your results. You've had a 4-game winning streak. You had a 4-game unbeaten streak. The one thing you haven't had in that is any real losing streaks. That's usually the sign of a good sign of a team that's putting together a respectable season.
We got off to a little bit of a slow start there, where we were 1-3, and we were at Mankato, and not many teams go into Mankato and win, especially against that team they have this year. But, the showstopper for us was the Mercyhurst loss. It was a wake-up call. Every game is hard. Every team is good. No wins come easy. And since that start of 1-3, and I think in the last 14 games, we're 9-3-2. This month of December has been as tough as any in college hockey. Denver has been our only home games, and we obviously we took that series from them, which we're very proud of, and a win and a tie. And then it was at Michigan State, who's a really good team, at Omaha, which is a really good team. I think the only team that swept Omaha all year is Duluth. They've beaten everybody they've played, and now it's against another really good hockey team in Harvard. So this month has been treacherous for us, and if we get the results we want this weekend, we're off to a really great start heading into the new year.
You don't hear coaches talk about 8-game months of December. Usually it's a single game or 2 games, or maybe 2, and then you take a little break. It's different for you. You're an independent team. You have to put together your schedule and take games when you can get them. How difficult has it been putting together the schedule? And, I look at this year, you took almost the entire month of November off. Now you don't take any weekends off from the beginning of December all the way through the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to we have to play teams when they're willing to play us, and that's okay with where we are in our program. People forget this is only our 4th full season as a Division I program, and we haven't minded it. Our guys liked not going home for Christmas, believe it or not. They really enjoyed staying. Obviously, the weather was nicer where they got to stay than wherever they were going to go. And it's given us a really good opportunity to just focus on us and hockey and playing games without classes. And so that's made the travel a lot easier. It's been a weird stretch of a bunch of Saturday, Sunday series in a row. So we get a little bit more time at home during the week. And we've had a lot of fun with it. And we hope that it kind of culminates here this weekend. Our guys are in the mix. They're dialed in, and because we haven't had a break, where a team like Harvard has had a break for 3 weeks. And sometimes that's really good for teams, and sometimes it's really bad for teams. You hear coaches a lot of times talk about Christmas hockey, and when they come back, those first couple of games back from break are really tough. With us, we're not going to get that because we haven't had a break. So we're excited about that, and we'll see if it pays off this weekend.
Last year, obviously, your team went to the NCAA tournament. They got the right number of wins. They beat the right opponents. They qualified on their pairwise alone. What did you learn from last year, and how much has what you learned from last year kind of gone into your goal setting as you kind of consider this year?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't recalibrate goals. We kept with the mantra of let's just focus on what's right in front of us, which is what we did last year, and we've carried it over into this year. And man, we're proud of where we're at. We're in a good spot. I think we wake up today 11th in the pairwise, and we've beaten some really good teams this year. But the last 4 weekends have been a little bit frustrating for our guys because sweeps last year came a little bit. Not easier, but more frequently for us. And the last 4 weekends, we've gone into the game 2 of the series, not only going into game 2, but into the third period, either tied or up with a chance to sweep, and we haven't done it yet. So, we got to start when we have the opportunity to sweep. You have to really bear down, and it's made us realize just how hard it is to sweep in college hockey. It's not easy.
We're talking with Arizona State head coach Greg Powers. And Greg, I want to talk a little bit about your players. Obviously, everybody remembers the name Johnny Walker from last year. He was one of the most prolific goal scorers in the country. He's kind of gotten off to that start again this year, 12 goals thus far. But James Sanchez up front, he's been pretty strong. What do you like about your forwards?
Well, we're deeper from a skill set, just utter skill, pure skill. We're deeper than we've ever been. And that just comes with time and more recruiting classes stacked on each other. But we have I think a genuine top 6 that can really play. And I think we're built where our bottom 6 does what we need them to do, and they're tough to play against, and they get pucks in deep and cycle teams and possess the puck and wear teams down and play a lot of time in the O-zone actually. And so that's kind of how we're built. We're scoring more goals usually. And I think we're scoring more goals than we have at any stage of our tenure in Division I. And it's a tribute to that top 6, Johnny Walker, James Sanchez, leading us down the way. And then we think we have the best D pair in college hockey. We think Brinson Pashnuk and Josh Maniscalco are 2 really high-end D, and they've given us a lot of production from the back end.
Yeah, I was going to go there next, and you mentioned those 2 guys. You add in Wilson. The 3 of those guys have 10 goals already. And what I'm noticing, they're not all coming on the power play. Your power play hasn't been as potent as you probably would like. The back end D has become a new staple in hockey over the last, say, decade. Do you have to recruit that, looking at these guys that can skate, move pucks, and more importantly, score?
Yeah, I think you need it. I mean, college hockey is just so good. If you don't have D that can get up into the play and create offense for you, it's going to be tough to generate any offense. And that's how we play. We like the 5-man cycles in the O-zone. We encourage our D to join the rush and let them play and join in on the offense. And I think if you don't have that, it just, teams are so well coached and so well prepared for at this level because of the nature of how we play. And you have to be creative and get all 5 guys involved in offense, or else you're not going to score.
Last year, you had a goaltender in Joey Decord, one of the best in the country. He left after his sophomore season. I don't think that was any surprise to you to sign a professional contract, the first in your program's history. When you looked at that position coming into this year, obviously you brought Max Prodzik in from BU, but it's been Evan DeBrouwer thus far that has taken over in the nets. He's really led this team. He's
been tremendous. Evan's been a rock back there for us. He's really only had one off weekend, and it was last weekend in Omaha. And it's certainly no discredit to them. They're a heck of a team, tough to play against with how they throw pucks and bodies at the net. It's not fun for a goaltender, but Evan's been unbelievable. He was really good for us against Denver and Michigan State. So he's had a good year so far, and I know he's only scratching the surface. He's not surprising any of us. We were confident that he could step right in for Joey and take over and do very well and get us wins. And we also have a ton of faith in Max and with his experience from BU, he's been a great addition for us and pushes Evan really hard in practice.
We mentioned it at the top. You're going to play Harvard this weekend, 2-game series. Another one of these tough series. You mentioned a tough month of December, and here it kind of ends with a very difficult Harvard team. Can you handicap this opponent a little bit?
Man, they're good. They're fast and they're skilled and they're tough to play against. Their power play is tremendous. I can honestly tell you, I'm really happy I don't have to watch Adam Fox run their power play anymore. That was not fun at all last year. But they still have some studs, and Riley Walsh and the freshman Abruzzese is really good, and Jack Bedini. The list goes on and on. I'm obviously Drury's at the World Juniors, but they're still incredibly deep and very talented, and obviously Teddy's one of the best that there is, and runs a great program and is a tremendous coach and guy, and so we're excited. I think it's a great program for us to be out here in a non-traditional market, especially as it pertains to college hockey, and play, because it's a big name, and people kind of correlate Harvard with college hockey, and it's a really good opportunity for us to grow our brand and grow the college hockey brand with Harvard.
They're calling it the SoCal Clash, and it will be Arizona State, Harvard, 2 games, Saturday and Sunday out in Irvine, California. Greg Powers, always good to see you. Nice to finally see you in person when we get to do these types of interviews, but best of luck this weekend.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.
That's Jim Connelly with Arizona State head coach Greg Powers. We'll be back with more of the Game of the Week podcast after this word from the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 to get your tickets today.
This is the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. And Jim, it was good that you had the opportunity to talk with Greg Powers. He's got a team that in our last podcast, we said, hey, this is a team that is good, maybe very good, but not quite elite. It's going to be interesting to see them match up against a strong Harvard team that has had a few stumbles as of late. But what's also really interesting about it is that it's on neutral ground. We saw that Arizona State at the break is 5-1-2 at home and 500 on the road. How much do you think that'll play into things this weekend?
That's a good question, and I'm not totally sure how much the neutral ice will play, but the fact that Arizona State has been playing for the last month, whereas Harvard is coming off a break of almost 3 weeks, that is the factor that I think could be the most interesting. Plus, you have the time travel. Now, Harvard, wisely, they flew out on Thursday. The first game is on Saturday, so they have a whole day on Friday to get themselves acclimated to West Coast time. So those are some of the big factors. Obviously, Harvard, they had a great start to their season and then stumbled heading into the break. And that's something that obviously Ted Donato and his club, they're going to want to rectify as quickly as they possibly can as they start the second half here. This is a good series. This is a very good test right out of the gate. But so too for Arizona State. You want to make sure that this is a team that is heading in the right direction. They've got themselves, as I mentioned in the interview, in position to be a national tournament team, but it's really how they finish. And they only have really 9 weeks or so to finish. Their season will be over. There is no postseason tournament for them to maybe make up the last bit of ground. They have to be in position when the final weekend of February comes.
And as you mentioned in our Spotlight podcast earlier in the week, they really need to get to about 21 wins. And right now with 10, they need to win about 2/3 of the games remaining through the second semester.
I think that's right. And there's no exact number. We know that. But I always say that 22 in the regular season is usually enough. 21, it seems to have been enough in recent years. You haven't seen a lot of teams. That is before they get into their postseason tournament. Of course, as I just mentioned, Arizona State, there is no tournament for an independent team, so they don't have those extra games that they will win. So I think 21 probably should be their magic number.
Well, there are a few tournaments going on this weekend that we'll want to preview. You had a preview at USCHO.com asking the question whether tournaments are still good for the game at holiday time or whether they've gone by the wayside, whether they've become passé. The one good thing about these tournaments is it does give some opportunity for some non-conference matchups that probably won't happen too often the rest of the way through the season, the way schedules go. So it's our last chance for teams to get some distance between them and other teams in their conference as far as non-conference play. It's a chance to pick up some wins against non-conference teams and help your league's overall standings and thereby helping pairwise. So from that standpoint, it is still something that is worthwhile. But I guess I'd have to agree that there's just not the excitement that there used to be over them.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that if you played that first week coming out of the exam break or the holiday break, whatever you want to call it, you were usually in a tournament somewhere. And, as I mentioned in the story, I mean, gone are tournaments like Wisconsin, the Badger Showdown. And that I actually think that it might have been played at Thanksgiving a couple of times as well. But you had the Badger Showdown. You had RPI's longtime tournament, goes back to the 50s. You had the Estero tournament in Florida, which was always Maine and Cornell. UConn always seemed to host a tournament. So a lot of these tournaments, it's become much more compressed. I mean, we only have 4 of them to talk about this weekend. And, I remember, when I first started with USCHO, we'd write these long tournament previews, and each writer would have to contribute, 3 or 4 capsules because that's how many teams were playing from their conference, if not more. There might be 7 or 8 teams from one conference playing in a conference tournament, a holiday tournament somewhere. That's all gone by the wayside.
The first 2 tournaments we're going to talk about are predetermined pairings. I guess I'm not so fond of those, but I understand that you want to make sure that maybe teams in the same league don't play each other or that you get certain matchups that happen. And the first one of those we're going to talk about is the Ledyard Bank Classic at Dartmouth College. That's Saturday and Sunday at Thompson Arena. Colorado College, UConn, Dartmouth, and St. Lawrence. The opening games have UConn and St. Lawrence, and then Colorado College versus Dartmouth. And on the second night, St. Lawrence and CC, UConn and Dartmouth. The home team in this tournament, the host team, Dartmouth, they made some noise by scoring an upset over Cornell earlier in the season. It was the first loss for Cornell. But these are some interesting matchups. UConn needs to be strong in this. St. Lawrence is trying to establish itself as an up-and-coming program. And Colorado College has been making noise in the NCHC. So this is an intriguing set of games.
It is. I mean, I think these were 4 teams that, maybe had some personal expectations, but didn't find themselves in the upper half of their preseason conference polls for the most part. But, every one of them has some really good qualities. I think UConn was playing very good hockey going into the break. St. Lawrence is a much improved team over last year. Colorado College, they've always been a little sneaky under Mike Haviland. And, they might be the strongest team in this field. And then Dartmouth, as you mentioned, they had a great upset over Cornell at home. They've been streaky at times, though. They've, had some good wins, had some bad losses in there as well. So I think this is a wide open field. And I'm not, with these predetermined fields, every one of them uses a different tiebreaker to figure out who's the champion at the end of the day if there's a tie. But you always hope that somehow on the second night, 2 of the teams that won end up in the same pairing on the second night.
The Catamount Cup at Vermont is going on Saturday and Sunday also at Gutterson Fieldhouse, one of those great old barns, the Quonset hut curved roof. The teams in that one in predetermined pairings are number 13 Providence, along with Lake Superior, Union, and Vermont. Now, this seems almost weird to say, but this is really must-win games for everybody in this tournament.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Union, I think they've dug themselves into a pretty big hole, as has Vermont. But Lake Superior and Providence, they're playing at times pretty good hockey. Providence, obviously, getting to play teams like a Union, they have to beat them. You know, you can't take a non-conference loss to a Union team that's going to hurt your pairwise significantly. And Lake Superior, that has the potential to probably hurt you a little bit. So, Providence should be the favorite going into this, but again, you don't know that another team that you don't face, say Vermont won't face Providence. If Vermont pulls out 2 wins and does so by a certain number of goals, they might win the tournament. But for Providence, they are the team that I think everybody should be looking at. They are the favorite, and they need 2 wins. For Nate Lehman, I think he wants to start his second half out in a good way. He needs 2 wins to do that.
For Union, you mentioned how they really dug a big hole. This is an opportunity maybe to change the momentum and get them prepared for the second half of the ECAC, a conference that tends to be pretty wide open as it heads into playoffs.
There's no doubt, and I expected a lot more out of this Union team, and having seen them play, on TV or on tape, but they just don't seem to have all of the components. Their defense gives up a lot of chances. They're finding ways to score goals at times, but not consistently enough. But I think that, if they get their game on track, you mentioned it, ECAC is wide open. They've got mostly league games left. They can gain some ground quickly. If they can put themselves into a top 5, top 6 position in that team, that is a team that is well coached and knows how to make some noise in the postseason. So it could be a big weekend for Union if they can get themselves going.
Back after a few year absence is the Mariucci Classic, hosted by the University of Minnesota at their 3M Arena at Mariucci. Number 2, Minnesota State, Bemidji State, Minnesota, and St. Cloud State, all teams from Minnesota this time around. Teams advance from semifinals, so we don't know what the matchup will be. Number 2, Minnesota State versus St. Cloud State, and Bemidji versus Minnesota. We've talked about these teams a lot on podcasts already this season. Minnesota State dropped from number 1 after losing a game in the last weekend of the season before the semester break. Bemidji has had an up and down season. Minnesota fans are restless again, but that's a team moving in the right direction. And St. Cloud State, in a rebuilding year, seems to be getting some momentum into the right direction.
Yeah, you know what? I'll first start by saying that I love the fact that this tournament is back. I've been out to the Mariucci a couple of times, and it's a fantastic event. It's usually pretty well attended. I mean, you don't bang out a sellout when there's no students on campus, but you still have a rabid fan base out there. And then the way this year's field was constructed, I love the fact that it's 4 Minnesota teams. And you've got that, almost like the GLI feel at the Mariucci, where you've got teams that maybe they're not all sitting there right around each other like you would have with the Bean Pot, but you've got 4 teams from the same state all playing in the field. And, interestingly, Brett Larson will be missing for this tournament from behind the St. Cloud State bench. He's over with the World Juniors. But 3 really, talented teams there, I think, in Minnesota, Bemidji, and Minnesota State. In St. Cloud State, when they play well, we started the last weekend before the break, they had a good series. And when they play well, they're a scary team. They're still a team that had maybe expectations on a lot of people's mind going into the season because of how strong they were last year. But listen, they lost a lot. They had some rebuilding to do. They seem to have a little bit of momentum. And if they carry that into the second half, watch out for them. Obviously, Minnesota State, they're the team to beat in this tournament. But I would love to see a Minnesota State-Minnesota championship game on the second night. That would be a lot of fun and probably create a really good atmosphere there at 3M Arena.
You mentioned the GLI. That's the Great Lakes Invitational, traditionally Michigan teams. It's at Little Caesars Arena, downtown Detroit, where the Frozen Four will be held in 2020. This goes on Sunday and Monday, early games on New Year's Eve. No predetermined outcomes from this. It'll be the teams advancing who win the semifinals. Just one ranked team in there, number 18 Michigan State, joined by Ferris State, Michigan Tech, and Michigan.
absolutely wide open field in my mind. Yes, maybe Michigan State, they've had a little bit of an upswing this season and of late, and they should be considered maybe your favorite. But I think this is a wide open field, and I like this field. Ferris has not had a good first half. Michigan State, they've had really good moments. Michigan wanted a better first half. It just didn't come for them. And Michigan State, nobody had high expectations. But come on, it's Dan Cole behind the bench, and he's going to turn this program around. And this is the year he's obviously started to do that. So I think this is a fantastic field. The one thing that's really interesting about this is, and I mentioned it in that story I wrote, is a lot of coaches look at these holiday tournaments where there's semifinals and finals. You get to advance. You get to play for a championship the second day if you win the first. But you play at odd game times. And I think the first day is maybe 2 and 5. And then the second day, because it's New Year's Eve, is 11:30 in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon. And what better way to prepare yourself for maybe an NCAA regional than playing at an odd time? Because you can play it anywhere from noon to 8:30 p.m. it seems in a regional these days. So I think that this is one of those, if you're in tournaments and fields, if you're thinking about maybe, hey, what's it going to be like to play in a regional? Here you go. You're talking about waking up at 6 a.m. for an 11:30 game so that you can have your pregame meal and be ready to go.
Yeah, nothing like chicken parm and pasta and green beans at 8:30 a.m., right? I don't want to look past Michigan Tech or Ferris State, but a Michigan State-Michigan championship on New Year's Eve would be fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's happened so many times in this tournament. And, back when both of these teams were powers, back in the 90s and even parts of the 2000s. And that was always, that was the draw of this tournament. And, Tech was, kind of a doormat for a number of years in this tournament, despite the fact that they won so many of them way, way back in the beginning of this tournament, which started, I had in my story somewhere back in the 70s, late 70s. So they had some early success, but they were a doormat. And then this fourth team that's always revolved, they've kind of been the outlier a lot of years, but so many times, you had Michigan State and Michigan in the final. That is kind of the big draw. And I think that the fans that are right there in the area, you're talking Lansing an hour away, and you're talking Ann Arbor, 15, 20 minutes away from Little Caesars. Those fans want to see it.
Well, that'll do it for the Game of the Week podcast for the year 2019. This episode has been sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, ncaa.com/Frozen4. We'll see you in 2020. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.